Hi everybody, I'll try to speak loudly so you can hear me. My name is Andrew Winters. This is my husband, Don Smith. And we're Rhode Island residents, along with Jessica and Emily and other people. For the last couple of years, really, we've been advocating specifically about the workplace bullying bill. But I want to give you a little bit of the story of what happened to me as a state employee here in Rhode Island when I spoke up and did what we're all not only encouraged to do, not only what we're morally compelled to do, but we're actually required to do if we find out that there is any kind of harassment, discrimination, bullying, assault, any of those kinds of things in the workplaces. In 1995, I moved here from out of state and began working in higher education in the state of Rhode Island. And what I'm going to do for a little bit of protection is refrain from naming the institution that I was involved with. And really, while that's very important, it's also important to recognize that the stories that we've been collecting have to do with state employees and other workplaces throughout the state of Rhode Island. And what we also find is that many of these stories actually mirror one another in terms of what happens to people who are targets and what happens to people when they try to actually get some help for these kinds of circumstances. So in 1995, I came here and I had a position as an administrator in Rhode Island higher education, and part of my job responsibility as well as my personal conviction was to advocate on behalf of any kind of faculty, staff, students who were experiencing any kind of problems, and also create education, advocacy, and support. I started the first LGBT programs here in the state of Rhode Island. The very first ones, there's an attempt even to pretend that I didn't do that, but I did do that. I created them, advocated for them, and established them. And beginning in 1995, what I saw when I came here to work in higher education was that there was a tremendous amount, an unbelievable amount of harassment and discrimination that was taking place that went unaddressed. Maybe a lot of people don't know this, and I'm not here just to talk about LGBT things, but for example, our state university between 1995 and 2 years ago was 5 times on the Princeton Review's list of America's most unfriendly LGBT campuses. And what I know from firsthand experience was that throughout the system, anytime we tried to report that, whether it was to public officials, whether it was to people within higher education, whether it was union officials, we didn't get support or we didn't get help, and the problems didn't stop. Finally, in 2010, things became so bad that I had contacted GLAAD, Gay Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, and they came and did some interviews with us on campus. And we met with the senior officials, plus we had state representatives at these meetings. And so you don't think it's me just saying this, or anybody doesn't think it's just what I've reported. Here's what the letter that went to not only the senior administration, but also to the office of the Rhode Island Attorney General said. And this was a 3-page letter. I'll just pick a couple of things for the sake of time. Students and staff have reported to me a lengthy history of significant and pervasive harassment on campus and in campus housing. These incidents include, but are not limited to, very regular instances of homophobic epithets. And I want to emphasize, this is one example with one group of people. What I witnessed happened to women, people of color, and so forth. The results were no less dramatic than this. And as a matter of fact, in this particular case, the Department of Justice had come onto campus because there were so many swastikas, racial epithets, and so forth. But anyway, these incidents include, but are not limited to, very regular instances of homophobic epithets and threats being yelled out car windows, particularly in proximity to the to the LGBT center. Sexually explicit and homophobic graffiti being drawn in the bathrooms near the LGBT center and on the doors of students' rooms. Used condoms being thrown at students' doors. Staff of the center having tires slashed and mirrors ripped off their cars, and threats of violence against students and staff who speak up about these issues. They further reported a serious lack of responsiveness to these matters by administration and retaliation against those staff who reported on these matters by removing them from meetings in which such issues would generally get raised and addressed, and perpetuation of the problems in the dorms by residential staff. The overall result is a general sense that students do not feel physically safe or emotionally safe on campus in general or in their campus housing. And it goes on to talk about the same kinds of dynamics with faculty and staff, many who were afraid to report. Many, and I can attest to the fact that I was one of the only adults on campus willing to bring those things forward. They go on in a page and a half to talk about all the laws that were broken and so forth. And as I said, this is September 2010, and this was copied to the Attorney General's office. Now, there were things done to address these kinds of things, but in terms of the retaliation piece, nobody had stepped up to address that. So what the administration did with public funding in cooperation, actually obstructing justice, hired a 6-month interim hit person to target me and a couple of other people who'd been speaking up. So after 17 years, that particular year I was an employee, employee of the Year award finalist. They hired this person to harass me so badly that I got PTSD. They terminated my career. They forced me to sign an agreement, and then they proceeded to do similar kinds of things with other people. Senior administrators used public funds. Senior administrators misused their positions, used attorneys, and also had collusion from various members in our legislature and so forth, because they wouldn't do anything about it. So, the other reason that I think it's important to tell this story is because what happened was that my husband Don and I proceeded to talk with officials throughout the state to try to get some help. We didn't file a lawsuit because we believe that the system's supposed to work. If you go to the Affirmative Action Office, you're not supposed to hear a warning, get outside and get some help. The files that you've established over a period of a decade and a half have disappeared. We're supposed to have these things addressed immediately, but instead the opposite was true. In fact, one of the first people that Don and I met with was our state senator, and here's what she said to us. She listened to this story for 5 minutes, much shorter than I've been so far, and interrupted us, and she said, here's the problem. I'm going to tell you guys the truth. There is a system in place in Rhode Island to do this to people. There's a system in place designed to do this, and our state senator told us that. And she said, and what you'll have to do is sign this agreement and then work with us take the deal and work with us behind the scenes so we can address it, and then stop making phone calls. We have been in direct contact and reported these things directly to both of our United States senators. Senator Whitehouse, as a matter of fact, has twice promised in public sessions to have problem-solving meetings that we have requested to fix the systemic problems, to fix the injustice that's done to us, and fix this system so that what our senator told us is no longer true, but that hasn't happened. Instead, we were harassed. I was harassed over the telephone by members of his staff at home. And I've sent letters to Washington to that effect. Congressman Cicilline told us our senator, or our congressman, Jim Langevin, should address it. Jim won't address it. And Senator Reid has been made personally aware, and the same thing happened. We were sent by 2 governors, this one and the previous one, on what was a wild goose chase. And this governor, in fact, sent us to meet with Jim Purcell, formerly chair of post-secondary education. Here's what Jim said. He said, here's the problem you guys have. The people who are supposed to fix this are the people who did it. So they're one and the same. So in other words, we have a corrupt system in place. One board member told us, here's the deal, Andrew, I guess if you want to be Martin Luther King, you have to be willing to shed a little blood. And that person is also the head of one of our unions here in the state. So I could go on with this, but I know this. I know that we all will say in this state, all of the people, the officials that I mentioned, that this isn't supposed to happen. Please let us know if it is happening. Well, what Don and I can tell you is that my history here in higher education was to do the right thing and report, and I can tell you without exception, I watched people be harassed more because of the reporting. I'm not saying that there were never any improvements, but the systemic piece was left into place. I can tell you that all of we've testified for 2 hearings here, and everything I'm telling you with a lot of documentation is in the hands of many legislators here who are attorneys. We also found out from the Attorney General's office, Spencer Dickinson was our rep. And Spencer actually filed a bill calling for an investigation. And actually, Jessica's been kind enough to pull that into this petition today, calling for an investigation and correction of what's taken place to us. What we found out from the Attorney General's office is, well, that was easy to fix. The public higher education institution simply hired a lobbyist to take care of it. So more public money spent covering up what's illegal action and what we've been told by various law enforcement people involves criminal acts. So we're here to say, as we have been for quite some time, we need to stop this. And it's not just because of what's happened to us, but it's because of what we know has happened to too many people here and too many people nationally. If we read the research about what happens with workplace bullying, we know that PTSD is common, additional workplace violence is common. And the PTSD is the same as people experience who are rape victims or experience severe combat. So we can't afford it. It costs us money. It's inconsistent with what this governor and every other public official says. We're spending a lot of time challenging Donald Trump for his behavior, and yet we have a system in place that involves our elected officials, unfortunately for these circumstances, many of whom are Democrats who are not standing up to the ideals that we believe we're supposed to uphold. So we want to keep working on it. We're willing to speak any place, and thank all of you for your participation in everything you're doing. We need to get some momentum and not get shut down, and not just have a bill put through, but a bill that actually calls for restitution and, where possible, reparation to people who've experienced this kind of thing. The injustices, in other words, need to be corrected. Thanks a lot.